So our next story comes from a regular storyteller. It is Donna Hunter. We're thrilled to have your story, Donna, and take it away.
Thank you. There was never more a need for a cup of tea laced with brandy than the day my 10 Benign story aired on national radio. The BBC head of programmes wanted me to give my parents a heads up about the story goodnight, as it involved them and could have been seen as libelous had I not informed them. With only days to go before the programme was due to be aired, I asked myself, how am I going to handle this difficult conversation? Saturday is traditionally my daddy's golfing day, which is good because the programme was due to go out on a Saturday at 10 a.m. When he's at golf, he wouldn't have to listen to it. In fact, I would have preferred neither of my parents to hear it. With no time to waste, I approached my dad first. Dad, do you know how I'm doing a wee bit of writing at the moment? Well, I skirted round the details, but he insisted on hearing every last detail. He shook his head, muttered under his breath, worried how he and my mum would be betrayed, and how many people were going to hear our dirty laundry aired in public. He asked, why the BBC? Why do you even feel the need to air it at all? It's been 30 years. Well, Dad, the BBC heard my story at a storytelling event and wanted to broadcast it because they believed it would resonate with a lot of people who had a story similar to mine. They thought the raw and emotional story of an ordinary young, unmarried, unsupported teenage mother-to-be in the late 80s, faced with uncertainty and the reality of giving her child up for adoption, was a powerful and hard-hitting one. People needed to hear it. I went on to tell him that I hoped it might encourage others to open up and talk about their own experience and perhaps find the strength and hope to be reunited with their child, like I was a few years earlier. I reassured him that there was absolutely no malice or ill intent towards him or my mum, and that the story had a beautiful ending. I emphasised how important it was for me to tell it, as I experienced it, not how someone else recalled it. I was thinking of my mother. I couldn't find words to tell her, so I asked him to, hoping it would soften the blow. But with his track record in diplomacy, I wasn't sure he could deliver. He had an awful habit of muttering under his breath in a passive-aggressive kind of way, especially when it came to awkward conversations. Even if he did manage to tell her, it would probably turn out garbled, like a game of Chinese whispers. Hard as it was for him, he agreed it should be aired on one condition. He had more time to get his head around it and to tell my mum. So I went back to the BBC and requested the story be aired a week later. All was well. My dad could get to his golf on Saturday. We even joked that he might want to stay at home when the programme went out, pull up his front row seat and listen to the radio with a strong cup of tea in his hand, laced with brandy. I'd heard nothing from my mother all that week. Had my dad even told her? Had she fallen out with me? There was no comeback, none at all. That's odd, I thought. Can you imagine my panic when I rang my dad minutes before the programme went out, only to be told my mother had found out that morning? He said they were sitting cosily in the living room, along with my younger sister, ready to listen to it on the TV in full HD cinema surround sound, without a tea or a drink in their hands. Sweet Jesus. I hurried off the phone and frantically texted my sister, you better beat it up the stairs before World War III breaks out. She texts back, oh lordy, I'm on my way upstairs now. Shh. I sat at home biting my nails during the duration of the programme. I couldn't listen to it myself. I waited after the call. Nothing. Just radio silence. Then a text from my sister. Mum's gone out to get her head short. Dad's banging about the house here, shouting, sweet Jesus and God Almighty. Come and get me, sis. I need out of here pronto. I picked her up at the bottom of the street. We went on one of those long, mindless drives to nowhere. with a drink on our minds. A nice cool pint to settle our nerves would be great. Only I was driving. I could always dump the car, get a taxi. We opted for coffee instead. A few hours later, I returned my sister to the family home, and feeling brave with her by my side, I decided to go in, face the music, whatever. I headed straight for the loo. When I came out, I saw my dad standing in the kitchen by the cooker. He had his back to us. The kitchen smelt like a Saturday fry. Toast popped up out of the toaster and the steam was flying out of the teapot. He didn't turn around. He probably wasn't expecting to see me come blazing in. Silence. Except for the sound of messy, man-sized sniffles, sighs, and then gulps amid the sound of the cooking. This was my big dad, sobbing his heart out. I felt an urge to go to him, to hug him, but my feet wouldn't budge. I just stood there, biting my lip, mesmerised by his emotions. I'd never seen him so upset. When he turned around, his eyes were raw, red. He muttered something incomprehensible. His words were laden with heavy sobs. Then he broke the silence. Donna, that was very hard for me and your mummy to listen to. More full body sighs and sobs. Well, sometimes, Dad, the truth is hard to hear. He poured out 3 mugs of tea and reached me and my sister one, along with the bacon and sausage sandwich. I had no appetite. My stomach was churning. I wondered where my mum was. Was she back? Was she upstairs? As I looked out into the hallway, I saw her feet approaching the front door. My heart was pounding in my head. I braced myself. She headed straight for the kitchen. Her lips were pursed in anger and she gave me that look before throwing herself down onto the chair. She didn't even take her coat off. My dad poured her a tea and sat it in front of her. I offered her my uneaten sausage and bacon butty. She just pushed it away, reached for her mug. No one spoke. For a few seconds, it seemed much longer. We just drank our tea. Then all hell broke loose. Words bounced off the kitchen wall and over my head. Aided by my sister who found her voice and spoke up for me, I asked everyone to shut up and stop yelling for a second and just listen. I reminded my parents of the reason why I did this story. It marked the end of a particular sad chapter in our lives, and I'd hoped that now it had been told, it would be the start of a new chapter. One of understanding, acceptance, and that much needed acknowledgement of wrongdoing in the past, whether intentional or not. I was now in my adoptive daughter's life and happy, and I wanted them to take comfort from that. Moving forward, that's all that mattered. We finally pushed past the pain of years of misunderstanding and anger over several cups of tea that day. We even poured a Baileys and drank to the future, to all our futures. I would never have imagined how a raw, emotionally charged story about adoption, my story, could change the landscape of our family's lives, but I hoped it would. I guess my writing tutor and counsellor were right when they said, we all have a right to tell a story, speak our truth, and be heard.
Donna, thank you so much. What an extraordinary story on that story. I've just put the link to the story when you first told it into the chat there. It's on podcast 101, so that folks can later on go and listen back to it. But if you just Google on 10x9 podcast 101, you'll get to hear it. How many more cups of tea and Saturday visits did it take before the family began to settle down into it? Was it okay after a while, Donna, or did it take a few weeks of visits?
That was it. That was it, Patrick. It had to come to an end because, you know, story popped up every now and again and everyone had a different version. And it was doing my head in and I just needed to tell it my way. And once that was it, it was put to bed and everybody just moved on and happy.
Because it isn't only that you have to be strong enough to tell the story, you have to be strong enough to help other people to cope with your strength telling the story. So and your poor dad, that's such a the sound of the toast and the kitchen smelling like a Saturday fry, and then the sound of him sniffling. So necessary tears from him. But yeah, you describe it so skillfully and with such meaning. You're an extraordinary writer. Thank you.